The worst mistake Ji-hoon ever made was firing his wife to impress a man who needed her alive. Sora Miller was still in surgical scrubs when her husband slid the termination folder across the boardroom table. Ji-hoon stood at the head of the table in a navy suit, looking pleased with himself. "It's not personal, Sora. It's math." Sora looked at him. "You practiced that line. The syndicate wants a hospital that serves elite clients only. Your pro bono cases cost us 11 million won last quarter alone. Those were brain surgeries on children who would have died." "Correct. And not one of them could pay." He slid the folder toward her. "Sign the termination. Your access card stops working at midnight. I've already moved your things out of the penthouse." For 1 second, Sora thought she had misheard him. Then she realized he had planned every detail of this humiliation before she even left the operating room. Sora looked at the folder. Then at the man she had spent 7 years building a life beside. "This hospital built its reputation on my hands, and you know it. And now they stay because of my connections." His voice was cold. "You're a liability. The chairman arrives in 20 minutes." The boardroom door swung open. Chairman Han walked in, and the room changed instantly. He was enormous, charcoal silk, black viper tattoos climbing both sides of his neck, hands wrapped in ink like armor. Ji-hoon bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the table. Han looked at Sora. Then at the folder. Then at Ji-hoon. Ji-hoon was still bowing when his mistake finally entered the room. Han's tattooed hand came down on the mahogany table. The wood split along the grain with a sound like a gunshot. A water glass fell and shattered on the floor. Nobody moved. Ji-hoon stared at the broken table and said nothing. Han did not raise his voice. That made it worse. "You fired the only surgeon in Asia who can repair a microaneurysm without triggering a stroke. Chairman, I have already identified a replacement. Dr. Yoon is ranked. 3 specialists," Han said, cutting him off. 3 different hospitals. I went to all of them in secret, because a man in my position cannot afford to let Seoul see him weak. They all told me the same thing. The aneurysm is deep. The position is dangerous. One wrong move and I spend the rest of my life in a bed. One specialist told me to prepare for paralysis. Another told me not to wake up on the table at all. All 3 refused to operate. But every report ended with the same name. He looked directly at Sora. "Ghost hand." Sora kept her face still. "I haven't agreed to anything." For the first time, Han looked at her as if she were the only other person in the room worth speaking to. "No," he said. "You haven't." Ji-hoon stepped forward, voice tight with forced calm. "Chairman, if we could discuss this privately. Reverse the termination. The paperwork has already. Reverse it." Han didn't move. He didn't need to. Behind him, Kong-ho took one quiet step forward. Ji-hoon picked up his phone. His fingers weren't steady. "HR, cancel the termination order for Dr. Miller. Effective immediately." Han sat down and folded his hands on the table. "Dr. Miller. Name your conditions." In his jacket pocket, Ji-hoon's phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen. The message read, "You have 48 hours to fix this." Red Lotus. The blood left his face entirely. 3 hours earlier, Chairman Han had been standing in an alley behind 7th Heaven Hospital with blood running down his collar. The alley smelled like rain and rust. A black SUV waited with its engine running while 3 men in charcoal suits scanned the street. Inside the car, Han pressed 2 fingers against his temple. A nosebleed started without warning, and dark red drops fell onto his white collar. Kong-ho opened the door. "Chairman. Seoul General. Now." No. Han wiped the blood with a folded cloth. "Seoul General has journalists outside. A man in my position does not collapse where cameras can see him." "Then where?" Han looked up at the hospital tower above them. Seventh Heaven Hospital, all glass and steel against the night sky. There is a surgeon here, he said quietly. Every specialist I visited wrote her name in their notes. Kong-ho said nothing. They say her hands don't shake. Another spike of pain hit behind Han's eye. He stepped out of the car anyway. Let's find out if that's true. The automatic door slid open. Warm hospital air rushed toward him. Han's private suite had been cleared of everyone else. Guards stood at both ends of the corridor. Nobody asked questions. Now, in that suite, Sora stood by the window reading Han's medical file. It was 40 pages long, and every page made the danger clearer. Han sat on the examination bed watching her. Well, he said. Basilar tip aneurysm. 7 millimeters. It sits at the top of the basilar artery, the deepest point near the brain stem. She closed the file. The vessel wall is thin. You've had this longer than you've told anyone. 1 millimeter in the wrong direction and you don't wake up. For the first time since the boardroom, Sora understood what kind of man had defended her. Not just a powerful man. A dying one. How long do I have? Weeks. Maybe less. The headaches are getting worse, aren't they? Han did not deny it. The door opened and Ji-hoon entered, wearing a fresh smile and a different suit. Chairman, I've arranged the full executive package for your stay. Whatever Dr. Miller needs. You fired her this morning to impress me. Ji-hoon stopped walking. You called her dead weight. In front of me. At a table where you were trying to sell me your hospital's quality. Han's voice was completely flat. What does that tell me about your judgment? Chairman, that was simply a restructuring decision. It tells me, Han continued, as if Ji-hoon hadn't spoken, that you are a man who destroys valuable things to look powerful. That is the most dangerous kind of fool. He looked at Kong-ho by the door. Remove him. Ji-hoon opened his mouth. Kong-ho's hand closed around his arm, and Kong-ho walked Ji-hoon out without another word. At dawn, Kong-ho drove Sora out of Seoul with one bag at her feet. Everything Ji-hoon had taken from the penthouse fit inside it. By evening, Sora was in the fortress library reviewing Han's scans when Han stepped into the doorway. Do you need anything? He asked. Better resolution on the CT scans. And I need my own surgical team. People I trust. Give me the names by morning. The pre-surgical exam was quiet, precise work. Sora mapped the vessels around Han's operative site while he sat perfectly still. Up close, she could see the scar from his previous aneurysm surgery and several older injuries that told her enough about the life he had lived. You're counting them, Han said. I'm working. You're doing both. Sora didn't look up. The scar from the previous surgery matters. The tissue healed badly. It will complicate the approach. Han was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I got the first shoulder wound when I was 23. I thought I was going to die in an alley in Busan. But you didn't, Sora said. No. She finished the exam and left the room with her notes in hand. In the hallway, she stopped for 1 second longer than she meant to. Han was not what she had expected. That was starting to matter more than she liked. She looked at him. You should know, I don't belong to you. I'm treating a patient. That's the only reason I'm here. Han nodded once. Understood. But he locked her door from the outside that night, and placed 2 guards in the garden below her window. Sora spent the first full day at the fortress reading. Not just Han's medical file, all of it. The imaging reports, the surgical notes from the 3 specialists who had refused him, the blood work going back 4 years. Then she found the page that changed everything. There had been a previous surgery. 5 years ago. A smaller aneurysm, different location, same artery. The operating surgeon's name had been blacked out with thick marker. The outcome notes simply read, successful. Patient discharged. She brought it to Han that evening in the main room where he sat reading contracts by lamplight. Who operated on you 5 years ago? He didn't look up immediately. A private arrangement. That surgeon clipped the first aneurysm incorrectly. The clip shifted over time and created additional stress on the basilar artery wall. That's why the second one formed where it did. She placed the file on the table in front of him. The original surgery caused this one. Han set down his pen. The surgeon who operated 5 years ago, is he still alive? That is not your concern, Han said quietly. It is my concern because it changes my surgical approach entirely. The tissue around the site has been disturbed before. It will behave differently under instruments. I need to know everything that happened in that operating room. Han looked at her for a long moment. Then he opened a locked drawer in the side table and placed a second file in front of her. Thicker. Older. No hospital letterhead. Sora opened it. The first page had a photograph. The surgeon in the photo was young, smiling, standing outside a different hospital. She recognized the building immediately. It was Seventh Heaven Hospital. And the name printed beneath the photo was Ji-hoon's. The man who had thrown her away that morning was the same man who had helped place Han at the edge of death. The call came at 7 in the morning. Sora's phone showed an unknown number, but she answered it because she always answered unknown numbers. Surgeons had to. The voice on the other end belonged to a clerk at the Korea Medical Licensing Authority. Dr. Miller. We've received a formal complaint regarding your surgical conduct. Your license has been placed under review pending investigation. All operating privileges are suspended effective today. Sora sat very still on the edge of her bed. What complaint? I'm not authorized to share details at this stage. You'll receive formal documentation within 72 hours. The call ended. She didn't need the documentation. She knew immediately who had done it. Kong-ho confirmed it by midday. Ji-hoon had filed a complaint through a third-party medical board contact, claiming Sora had performed an unauthorized procedure on a private patient, meaning Han, without proper hospital oversight. He had done it carefully, with paper trails pointing away from himself. Sora brought it to Han with the documentation printed out. He can't touch the surgery directly, she said, so he's removing my ability to operate at all. Losing Sora was not enough for Ji-hoon. He wanted to make sure no one else could rely on her either. Han read the paper slowly. His face gave nothing away. How long does the review take? 60 days minimum. I have maybe 2 or 3 weeks before your condition becomes critical. Han placed the papers down. I'll have it resolved by tomorrow morning. I don't want it resolved by force. I want it resolved correctly, with evidence that the complaint was fraudulent. If you break it illegally, he files again and this time it sticks. Han looked at her with something approaching surprise. You think like a strategist. I think like a surgeon. You remove the problem cleanly or you cause more damage than you started with. That night, Ji-hoon received a visitor at his hotel suite. A young lawyer carrying a briefcase. The lawyer worked for Han's legal team and spent 45 quiet minutes explaining exactly what would happen if the complaint was not withdrawn by 9 the following morning. Ji-hoon withdrew it at 8:57. But his phone was already dialing a new number. Someone who could do what lawyers couldn't. The call came at 2 in the morning. Not to Sora's phone. To the room outside her door where one of Han's men always stood. She heard voices. Then a knock. Dr. Miller. It was Kong-ho. We have a situation. Kong-ho led her into a basement surgical bay hidden beneath the fortress. On the table was a young man, mid-20s, unconscious. A gunshot wound to the upper left abdomen, entry and exit, but the exit wound had fragmented and something was bleeding internally that shouldn't be. 3 men in black stood along the wall. One of them was shaking. Sora snapped on gloves and stepped under the light. How long ago? 40 minutes, Kong-ho said. Who are you people that you have a fully equipped surgical bay in your basement but waited 40 minutes to call me? Nobody answered. She didn't wait for one. She worked for 2 hours. The wound was deep and difficult, but she found the bleed and closed it. She monitored for another 40 minutes until she was satisfied. When she stepped back and stripped her gloves, the 3 men along the wall were all looking at her differently than when she had walked in. The one who had been shaking walked forward. He was young. A scar across his chin. He pressed both fists together and bowed, deep, formal, the kind of bow that meant something specific in the world these men lived in. "Life debt," he said quietly. In that moment, Sora stopped being a guest in Han's house. She became someone his men would trust without question. Sora looked at her own hands under the surgical light. Clean. Steady. She had not felt this certain of anything in months. 2 weeks later, Ji-hoon arrived at Seoul's biggest medical gala expecting the room to belong to him. He was holding his second glass of champagne when the elevator opened and Sora walked out. She was wearing a black dress that she had not chosen herself. Mrs. Yun had laid it on her bed that afternoon with a note that said simply, "Tonight you are not hiding." Her hair was down. Her posture was straight in the way it always was in an operating room. She was not alone. Han walked beside her in charcoal, unhurried, his tattooed hands fully visible. The room changed the moment Sora stepped out of the elevator beside Han. Ji-hoon set his glass down. Han moved through the room with the ease of a man who had never needed an invitation to anything. He introduced Sora to 3 board members, a hospital group CEO, and the Deputy Minister of Health, in that order, without raising his voice or making a single obvious display of status. He didn't need to. The people he introduced her to already knew exactly who he was. Sora watched 2 of her former colleagues cross the room to speak with her, people who had ignored her calls for the past 2 weeks since Ji-hoon's press leak had started circulating. They were suddenly very warm. Very interested. Ji-hoon approached at the end of the evening. He had waited until Han was across the room. "You look well," he said carefully. "I know," Sora replied, and turned away from him to finish her conversation. Across the room, Han watched Ji-hoon's face, and what he saw there was not the anger of a man who had lost a battle. It was the cold focus of a man who had just decided to stop playing carefully. The envelope arrived at the fortress gate at noon. No postage. No return address. The outer paper was red. Kong-ho brought it to Han unopened. Han read it standing at the window in the main room, and when he finished he folded it once and placed it in his jacket pocket without a word. Sora found out because she walked into the room 20 seconds after and read everything she needed from the stillness in his shoulders. What happened? Han turned toward her, calm but harder than before. The Red Lotus Syndicate has become aware of your presence here. Sora felt the information land. Meaning? Meaning they understand that my survival depends on a successful surgery. And they have concluded that the simplest way to ensure I do not survive is to ensure you cannot operate. He said it calmly. That made it worse. They threatened me, Sora said. They gave a deadline. 1 week. They want you to leave the country. If you don't, they will take steps to remove you themselves. What kind of steps? The kind that don't leave paperwork. Sora sat down, not from fear, but to think clearly before she spoke. She pressed her fingers together and looked at the floor. How much time do I need for the surgery to be safe? At minimum, another 10 days of preparation. Then we have a problem. Yes, Han agreed. We have several. But the one you don't yet know about is the most urgent. Someone inside this fortress told them you were here. The danger had changed shape. It was no longer outside the walls. It was already inside them. Sora looked up slowly. Somewhere in the building, behind one of those loyal faces and careful routines, someone was already working against them. That evening, Han handed her a glass of water during his routine check. Sora raised it halfway, then stopped. At the bottom of the glass, there was the faintest cloudiness. Don't drink yours, she said. Han set his glass down immediately. She called for the glass to be taken to analysis immediately. She documented everything: the time, the volume remaining in each glass, the position of the carafe. She made Kang-ho seal the room. The analysis came back at midnight. Potassium chloride. Enough to stop a heart within the hour and subtle enough to look natural at first glance. Now they knew two things. Red Lotus had reached Han's inner circle. And the next attempt would be worse. Han sat with the report in his hands for a long time. The carafe was brought up by kitchen staff at 6:15, Kang-ho said. The same staff who have worked this floor for 4 years. Which one? Han asked. We don't know yet. It could have been added at any point in the chain. Sora looked at the report and understood how many directions the threat was now coming from. And now she knew the next move would be worse. The second attempt came through medication. Sora found it during a routine review of Han's daily protocol. A dosage adjustment had been made to his blood pressure medication, a small increase, the kind that required a counter-signature from a supervising physician. The counter-signature on the form was hers. She had never signed it. She pulled every medication order from the past 2 weeks and laid them out on the library table in chronological order. 3 adjustments. 3 signatures that looked like hers until you stared long enough to see the forgery. The pharmacy orders all traced back to one supply chain entry point inside the fortress, a medical supply coordinator named Park Sung-jae who had been part of Han's household staff for 2 years. She brought the evidence to Kang-ho in a clean, ordered file with every discrepancy highlighted. He looked through it without expression. Are you certain? He asked. I don't present things I'm not certain of. Kang-ho left with the file. Sora didn't ask what happened next. She changed the entire medication protocol and put every new order under dual verification with her direct involvement. Park Sung-jae was removed from the fortress that evening, quietly and without announcement. What she did not know was that before he left, Park had managed to send one final message. It contained 2 things, the exact surgery date and the name of the operating theater. From that moment on, the countdown became real. Somewhere across the city, the Red Lotus began to move. Ji-hoon came to the fortress 2 days after the gala. He came alone. He told Han's gate security that he had a private medical matter to discuss with Dr. Miller. They made him wait 40 minutes in the entrance hall before Kang-ho brought the message to Sora. Tell him I'm busy, she said. Kang-ho brought the message back. Ji-hoon was still there. She went down eventually because she was not afraid of him and she wanted him to understand that clearly. He was sitting in the entrance hall looking smaller than she had ever seen him. His navy suit was still perfectly pressed, but there was panic behind his eyes now. I made a mistake, he said. Several mistakes. Sora remained standing. Is this the part where I forgive you? I don't need forgiveness. I need you to understand that I am in a difficult position. You are always in a difficult position of your own making. His jaw tightened. The Red Lotus approached me 3 months ago. Before all of this, they offered a partnership, access to private surgical facilities, offshore accounts, protection for the hospital expansion. I was going to use it to build something significant. And now? And now they want something I can't give them. They want access to the fortress. Floor plans. Security rotations. He looked at her. They think I can get that information from you. That was the moment Sora understood how far Ji-hoon had already fallen. He was no longer trying to win her back. He was trying to survive by selling her out. You came here, Sora said slowly, to ask me to betray the man protecting my life, for the people who threatened to kill me. I came here to warn you. You came here because you're terrified. She walked to the door and opened it. Get out of this house, Ji-hoon. He left. But as Kang-ho watched the car disappear down the driveway, he was already thinking about the conversation Ji-hoon would have on the other end of that drive, and what he would agree to in order to survive it. 2 days before the surgery, 4 Red Lotus men entered 7th Heaven Hospital wearing Real maintenance uniforms and carrying real access cards. Someone had already inserted a loop into the security feed. Clean work. Professional work. The four men split into two pairs. One pair went to the medical records floor. One pair went up. Kong-ho's intelligence contact called him at 11:14 with one word. Kong-ho was through the fortress door and into the car before he had finished the call. At the hospital, the two men headed upward were not going to records. They were going to the private floor where Han's pre-surgical preparation suite had been set up. The one that Ji-hoon had authorized access to 3 days earlier for what he called a routine equipment delivery. The first guard outside Han's suite heard the stairwell door open and turned, and that was all he had time to do. Gunfire tore through the corridor lights. Glass exploded from the fixtures above. The emergency lighting snapped on red. A body hit the floor beside the elevator. Inside the suite, Han's remaining guard pushed him flat to the ground behind the reinforced cabinet. Han did not resist. His hand found his phone. He called Sora. One ring. Stay in the fortress, he said. Don't move. Don't open the door for anyone I haven't cleared personally. For the first time, Sora understood the truth. The surgery was no longer the real problem. The war had already started. Outside in the corridor, Kong-ho's car was still 8 minutes away, and the two men in maintenance uniforms were already through the first door. Kong-ho arrived at the hospital in 7 minutes. He had run 2 red lights and left the car in the middle of the drop-off lane. He came up through the service stairs with 2 of his own men and hit the private floor corridor at a run. The Red Lotus pair were still in the building, one was down, one had retreated to the supply room at the end of the hall and was holding a position. Han's guard, Min-jun, was alive but had taken a round to the left shoulder. He was on the floor with his back to the wall, right hand pressed to the wound, still holding his phone in the left. Kong-ho cleared the corridor. His man pulled the supply room door, the shooter was gone, out through the window onto the maintenance scaffold, already unreachable. He called Sora from the floor beside Min-jun. I need you here, he said. Left shoulder, gunshot, the bleeding is not stopping. I told you to keep him flat. He is flat. I'm coming. She arrived 15 minutes later with a field kit. Kong-ho had cleared the corridor. 2 of his men stood at each stairwell entrance. Sora knelt beside Min-jun and worked by feel as much as sight. The bullet had clipped the subclavian artery. Not catastrophic yet, but moving fast. She packed it, clamped it, managed the pressure. Her hands didn't shake. Min-jun watched her face while she worked. You're not scared, he said. I'm very scared, she said. My hands just don't know that. He almost laughed. Kong-ho watched from 3 feet away, and when she had stabilized Min-jun and sat back on her heels he said quietly, the surgery is in 2 days. They know where. They know when. Sora looked at him. Then we change where. This was no longer just a surgery plan. It was now a moving target in the middle of a manhunt. The fortress blueprints arrived in a Red Lotus server at 9 that evening. Complete architectural drawings. All 3 floors. The basement surgical bay. The backup generator location. The external camera blind spots marked in red. Security rotation schedules for the next 72 hours. Kong-ho's tech team intercepted the transfer 20 minutes after it landed, not because they had been watching Ji-hoon specifically, but because they had put a tracker on every file that touched the fortress system after the pharmacy incident. The transfer originated from Ji-hoon's personal laptop at his hotel suite. Kong-ho placed the printed intercept report in front of Han without comment. Han read it once. Then again. He set it down. He sold them the surgery location as well? The alternate site we selected this morning. He must have had eyes on the planning conversation. Han was quiet for a long time. It was the kind of silence that came before a final decision. Is Sora aware? Not yet. Tell her, Han said. She needs to know everything now. Up to that point, Sora had been dealing with a traitor inside the fortress. Now she was dealing with a husband willing to trade her life for time. Han stood up and moved to the window. And the surgery moves again. Third location. This time nobody outside this room knows until 1 hour before. The equipment transfer will be difficult on that timeline. Handle it. Kong-ho nodded and moved to the door. Kong-ho. Han didn't turn from the window. Ji-hoon, don't touch him yet. I want him to believe he is still useful to them. If they think the blueprints are valid, they position for an attack that won't come. That buys us time. In his hotel suite, Ji-hoon told himself he had no choice. Outside, Kong-ho's men were already watching the building. The morning before everything changed, Sora found Han in the garden with a cup of tea. For once, neither of them spoke about scans, schedules, or blood pressure. After a while, Han said, "My mother kept a persimmon tree when I was a boy. She used to say it took 15 years to fruit properly." Sora looked at him. Did she ever see it? 3 times. Then Sora said, "After the surgery, plant something that takes a long time." Han glanced at her. "Is that your way of saying you expect me to survive?" "It's my way of saying you should give yourself something to wait for." When he stood to leave, he stopped at the door. "Whatever happens on that table, Dr. Miller, what you did for this household was never just medical." Han was walking from the main room to the library at 8:45 when his right leg stopped cooperating. He caught the wall. His vision went white at the edges. Then the pain hit, enormous, blinding, a pressure behind his eye that was different from every headache before it. He hit the floor hard. Mrs. Yin found him 40 seconds later and screamed for Kong-ho. Sora was at his side in under a minute. She moved fast and quietly and her face showed nothing except the focused expression of a surgeon receiving new information. His speech was slightly slurred. His right hand grip was weaker than his left. His pupils were uneven. "The aneurysm is expanding," she said. "His brain is under pressure. We can't wait until tomorrow." "How long?" Kong-ho asked. "Hours. Maybe less. If it ruptures before I get inside. Then we go now. The third location isn't fully set up." "It has been. I finished it an hour ago. I was going to tell you over breakfast." Kong-ho was already on the phone. "We move in 20 minutes. Sora held Han's hand. Not for comfort, she was monitoring his grip response. But he held back, which surprised her. "Don't tell me odds," he said. His voice was thick but his eyes were clear. "Just tell me one thing. Have you done this before? Not the simulation. A real basilar tip." She met his eyes. 3 times. All 3 patients are alive. "Good enough," he said, and closed his eyes to conserve what remained. Outside, the cars were already moving into position. Across the city, Red Lotus was preparing to hit a location that no longer mattered. 38 minutes later, Han was on the operating table at a hidden surgical facility. Sora scrubbed in, gowned, gloved. Her team, 3 people she had named on her first night at the fortress, took their positions without speaking. They had done pre-op drills twice. They were ready. Her phone vibrated once before she went in. Sora checked it out of habit. The message was from an unknown number. It read, "Check your anesthesiologist. One member of your team is compromised." She stood absolutely still for 4 seconds. Then she walked to the anesthesiology station where Dr. Lim, a quiet man with 12 years of credentials, was preparing his protocol. She looked at his hands. Dr. Lim was too still. That was the first thing Sora noticed. "Walk me through your protocol," she said. He did. Smoothly. Correctly. Almost perfectly. That tiny flaw was what gave him away. One drug listed in the wrong sequence, an error that would not kill Han immediately but would interact with the surgical anesthesia to create a window of dangerous instability during the most critical 5 minutes of the procedure. Sora turned to Kong-ho at the door. "Remove him," she said quietly. "Get me Dr. Park from the backup list." Even now, minutes before the surgery, someone was still trying to kill Han from inside the room itself. Dr. Lim did not go quietly. It took 2 of Kang Ho's men and 4 minutes. While they removed him, Sora stood beside Han's table, breathed once, and forced herself back into focus. Dr. Park arrived in 11 minutes. She was 60 years old, wore no-nonsense glasses, and asked no questions about what had happened to the previous anesthesiologist. Sora liked her immediately. They were 17 minutes into the procedure when the facility's main power cut out. Not a trip. A cut. Clean and deliberate. The backup generator activated in 4 seconds, protocol standard, but 4 seconds in open brain surgery is a lifetime. Every light in the room died and returned in emergency red. Sora did not move her hands. In the corridor outside, Kang Ho's team had heard the power cut as the signal it was and were already in position. Red Lotus had sent 6 men. They came through the service entrance, which was exactly where Kang Ho had positioned his heaviest cover, because the service entrance was what anyone consulting Ji-hoon's blueprints would use. Gunfire echoed through the corridor outside. Inside the operating room, nobody looked up. Sora worked. The scar tissue from the earlier surgery was exactly where she knew it would be. She navigated it the way her simulator drills had mapped, with 3 small movements that she had practiced until they were automatic. Pressure, she said. Stable, Dr. Park replied. Outside, a body hit the corridor floor. Then another. Then silence. Sora reached the clip position. This was the moment. The most dangerous 4 millimeters of the entire operation. Her hands moved to the site, and everything she was, every year, every patient, every drill, every early morning in the garden, came down to what happened next. The clip applicator touched the aneurysm neck. Sora stopped breathing. Not from fear. From precision. At that depth, even the smallest movement could kill him. Tell me the pressure, she said. 110/70. Holding. The neck was narrow. One side clean. The other scarred. Sora adjusted the applicator by a fraction to account for the resistance Ji-hoon's old surgery had left behind. Then she placed the clip. 1 movement. Clean. Final. For 3 full seconds, nobody in the room spoke. Then Dr. Park said, pressure stable. No bleed. He's holding. Sora exhaled. She checked the clip. Then the surrounding vessels. Then the old scar. Everything held. She stepped back from the table 2 hours and 40 minutes after she had stepped in. Her scrubs were soaked through. Her shoulders already ached. She knew they would ache for days. She pulled her mask down. Close him, she said to her team. Carefully. Kang Ho was in the doorway. His left arm had a field dressing on it. His expression was the same as always. She looked at him. He nodded once. How many? She asked. 6 came in. None left. Minjun took another hit. His second in 3 days. He is very angry about it. For the first time since the boardroom, Sora let herself believe they had survived. By sunrise, Kang Ho had started the retaliation. By nightfall, Red Lotus had lost 3 bases and its operations chief. The name arrived within 4 hours, along with enough documentation to prove it. The coordinator was a man named Director O, Red Lotus Operations, who had spent 12 years building his career on the assumption that Chairman Han would eventually be vulnerable. He had miscalculated the timeline. Kang Ho delivered the complete file to Han's bedside. Han read every page without speaking. Even in a hospital bed, with an 4 in his arm and a bandage on his head, he carried the same cold authority as ever. He made 2 phone calls. Both short. By evening, Director O was gone for good. In a hotel suite on the other side of Seoul, Ji-hoon watched the news on his phone and understood that the organization he had tried to partner with had just lost its operational command. He understood something else too, That the only reason he was still in that hotel room and not somewhere considerably worse was because someone powerful had chosen, for the moment, to leave him there. The waiting was not mercy. It was a message. 6 weeks after the surgery, Sora signed a lease on a building in Mapogu. The building had 3 floors and a surgical suite equipped exactly the way Sora wanted. She chose not to ask who had made that possible. She named it the Sanctuary Clinic. The first week, she took 4 patients. All pro bono referrals from the public hospital network, the cases that the private system had determined were too complex or not profitable enough to pursue. A 14-year-old with an arteriovenous malformation. A 47-year-old teacher with a tumor sitting against the motor cortex. A man who had been told by 3 hospitals that his condition was inoperable. Sora operated on all 3 in the first week. All 3 went home. Word moved through the medical community the way significant things moved, quickly and without requiring advertising. By the end of the month there were 70 referrals on the waiting list. By the end of the second month there were 3 senior surgeons who had left established hospital positions to join her team. Han came to the opening without announcement. He arrived as the last patient of the afternoon was being taken to recovery, so the waiting room was empty. He stood in the middle of the clean white reception area in his charcoal suit and looked around at what she had built. "It's quiet," he said. "That's how a clinic should be," Sora replied. "Loud means something has gone wrong." He placed an envelope on the reception desk. She didn't open it while he was there. Inside was a single card. On it, in Han's careful handwriting, "The persimmon tree in the garden is showing new growth. I thought you should know." Ji-hoon's fall did not happen all at once. It came apart in pieces over the following 3 months, which was in many ways worse. First, the hospital board removed him as director following a formal investigation into the fraudulent medical license complaint he had filed against Sora. The investigation had been thorough and clean, evidence well documented, presented through proper legal channels, because Sora had insisted from the beginning that it be done correctly. He was not arrested. He was simply removed. His name was taken off the building. Then the financial review. An independent audit commissioned by the board found irregular fund movements connected to his early Red Lotus conversations, money that had passed through the hospital accounts in preparation for a partnership that had never been formally declared. His personal assets were frozen pending further review. The penthouse. The car. The box at the stadium. The membership at the private club where he had entertained investors over glasses of single malt. Gone. One piece at a time. He was reassigned, at the hospital board's recommendation and with a dark particular irony, to the facilities maintenance division of Seventh Heaven Hospital's community health wing. The wing that Sora had built her reputation in. The ward where she had performed her first pro bono surgeries. He reported for his first day in work clothes rather than a suit. He carried a mop. He passed, in the corridor, a portrait of Sora that the hospital had quietly placed on the wall beside the surgical wing, a professional photograph, simple frame, her name and title beneath it. He did not stop walking. Across the city, at the Sanctuary Clinic, Sora was already in surgery. She had been called at 6 in the morning for an emergency case, a young woman, a ruptured vessel, brought in from a public hospital that didn't have the capability. The kind of case that nobody else would take on that kind of notice. Sora had been dressed and ready in 4 minutes. Now her hands moved under the surgical light with the calm certainty of someone who had already survived the worst. No shake. No hesitation. Only calm authority. By then, the name had followed her out of the underworld and into medicine. In the underworld they had called her Ghost Hand. In the medical world they had a different name for her now. The Lady of the Iron Pack. The vessel closed cleanly. The patient lived. Sora stepped back from the table and looked at her hands for one brief second. Still steady. Then she nodded to her team. "Closer," Sora said. Then she stepped out into the bright corridor of her own clinic, exactly where she belonged.